Welcome back to 2C TV, your global news channel. We have some breaking news coming from, the United Kingdom, but also technically Washington, DC, as the British government have now decided to suspend intelligence sharing with the US government for the first time. Things are escalating between the two countries as Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, is basically shooting himself in the foot. We're going to explain what's going on here. The White House and Pentagon are not too happy with their so-called closest allies, Britain, but everything goes back to the situation in the Caribbean and, of course, the potential conflicts with Venezuela and, of course, the drug cartels who continue to target American citizens. Venezuela are now preparing their military against the US troops in the region. Things could heat up any moment. Over the last few days, we've had a lot of escalations, but we're going to give you guys the latest information on what's happening between these two, President Trump and the stupid Starmer of Britain. All right, before we start, don't forget we have our limited offer still going on. RIPBBC is the promo code. Use the promo code RIPBBC to get 50% off annual memberships of 2C TV Plus to join the winning team, to get full access to the channel and download the 2C TV app. There is a situation ongoing right now also in the House of Commons. We do have our live feed from Parliament. Before we do that, let's focus on what we actually know about this situation with the intelligence sharing. So the UK is no longer sharing intelligence with the United States about the suspected drug trafficking vessels in the Caribbean. According to the British government, they do not want to be complicit in the US military strikes that believes that the attacks are illegal. Essentially, the British government are now relying on the United Nations lawyers and the so-called international law to say that, well, seems like the globalist entities are telling the Americans that if you attack your enemy, the drug cartels from South America, then those attacks are illegal. So the British government, alongside another country, by the way, Canada, have decided to cut off ties because they say, well, basically our liberal globalist friends are not going to be too happy with us if we share intelligence with the Americans, when America wants to basically keep the region safe and fight against the enemy. For years, the United Kingdom, which does control a number of territories in the Caribbean, where it bases intelligence assets, by the way, has helped the American government locate vessels suspected of carrying drugs so that the United States Coast Guard could obviously intervene. Now, under the new Labour government and the new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, things are changing. The whole point of MI6 and the British intelligence assets being in the Caribbean was to help their closest ally, the United States. That was the whole point. And of course, to protect the territories. And this has been happening with previous governments. It's been a normal relationship. Suddenly, because the globalists have gone to Keir Starmer saying, we don't want you to be associated with President Trump on this, suddenly the British state is saying, yeah, this is not a good idea. We are breaking the law, international law. It's very important, apparently. International law. Things get worse. So the US military are still continuing their drills. They are preparing to fully attack even Venezuela. Have a look at the US military forces that have now been deployed to the Caribbean in support of the Southcom mission. Of course, they're the command in the south. The USS Ford aircraft carrier, the strike group, have also now officially arrived in the Caribbean. So things are escalating very quickly. Everybody's prepared. The Venezuelan side and Maduro have obviously asked support from China, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and Russia. So far, only Russia have sent out support. The others well, China don't want to get involved directly, and the Iranian regime can't really afford it. So this is the current situation. Now, when we have a look at some of the recent footage of the US military, of course, targeting the enemy vessels, including this one, which is obviously unclassified footage, you can see that the threat is still there. The point of the strikes by the US in recent weeks was to deter the enemy, was to essentially stop the attacks on the American citizens. That hasn't really stopped because most of the drug traffickers and the cartels, the network, go back to Venezuela and Maduro. Even the cartels in Colombia, the connections go to the wider network in the region, goes back to their dictatorships that are using the money to fight against the United States and the West in general. So it is absolutely in the interests of the American government to fight against it because they are the enemy. Now, what are the Venezuelans doing? Well, Venezuela under Maduro have now also started deploying kind of slightly older Russian-made weapons. A lot of them are from the 80s and 90s, and are preparing two defense strategies against the potential US attack. Now, there is what they call a guerrilla resistance, which is smaller military units will be operating over 280 sites nationwide across Venezuela to conduct sabotage and hit-and-run attacks by the coast. But there is also going to be the actual National Army and of course the Navy to be around the Coast Guard, the coastline to stop the Americans. But I'm not really sure if they genuinely believe they can fight against the Americans. It's probably best if Maduro just stands down at this point, because the rhetoric from the White House in recent days has been, it's time's up. It's over. Maduro needs to find his way out. He needs to stand down. Venezuelans also should be liberated. Now, earlier today, on Tuesday, the 11th of November, Maduro's government also announced that what they call a major nationwide military deployment across the country with the support of some of their allies without listing the allies. Now, obviously, there is a major presence of Hezbollah backed by the Islamic Republic. So while the IRGC from Tehran themselves are not directly sending any support in terms of military support, unlike the Russians, they have obviously used their proxies, Hezbollah, to remain in Venezuela to support Maduro's socialist government. Now, the aircraft carrier, USS Gerald R. Ford, alongside the others, have now embarked the carrier wing 8, and they are escorting the rest of the troops. They are operating in the US Southern Command. The current escorts also include the guided missile destroyers, as well as the DDG-96. And of course, also the usual suspects who will be the intelligence assets to help with the United States Southern Command. Let's not forget, only a few days ago, the Ford Carrier Strike Group was redirected from the Mediterranean Sea to go all the way to the Caribbean to show support. This is basically the US naval presence meaning escalating the situation, rightly so, to defend the American interests and the American people against the enemy. A bunch of criminal members of the cartel whose money funds the socialist governments who are fighting America. Another footage of the attacks, the recent attacks on the vessels, which we can also show you. And I'm going to get your reaction in the live chat in a second, as we are now waiting for some reaction from the UK government and Downing Street in regards to the decision to suspend intelligence sharing, which is very, very embarrassing for a lot of people in Britain who have been boasting about the special relationship between the UK and the US. Things will be obviously changing. I think what we are waiting for is There is going to be a statement shortly from the Pentagon as well. So we will wait. So we still have our live feed from the House of Commons in Westminster. There's a lot of conversations right now in Parliament on not just foreign policy, but also the current scandal in the UK, which is about the BBC. It seems like the British state in general, and I'm saying the state, so not just the government themselves, the British state have decided to launch a war on President Trump and the White House on a number of fronts recently. We had the BBC, who are doubling down on their attack on President Trump, despite the fact that President Trump and the White House have now given them until Friday to retract it, otherwise they're going to take them to court. So you've got the BBC, and the MPs are panicking. They're obviously having a debate in Parliament. And now you also have the UK intelligence sharing being suspended, cutting off ties with the American allies. I'm not really sure what the plan is right now, why Britain, let's just say, just Britain in general, is doing this. So now there's a conversation also about the future of the BBC's bosses, because it's not really just about the CEO of BBC News as well as the Director General who did resign a couple of days ago, but you also have all the others who are part of the same globalist club who are still in place. Nothing is going to change, because the way things work in the UK is that it's a system-based tyranny, which means even if you sack someone, the people responsible for rehiring for that position, for example, the head of the BBC, the head of the NHS or whatever, is the same people. That's the difference between the UK and the US, for example. We don't really have the democratically elected representatives having enough power to be able to run the state. So you can change governments, you can change prime ministers or ministers, but the state remains the same. Now, I'm going to get some reaction from the live chats. Don't forget, as I said, we do have, speaking of the BBC, of course, BBC is dying. So we are mourning the death of the BBC. Rest in peace, BBC. And in order to celebrate that mourning with you guys, we are giving you guys a 50% discount to join 2CTV Plus as an annual member if you use the promo code RIPBBC. Yes. Rest in peace, BBC. Join us as a limited offer. And of course, once you join on the website, you just go directly on 2c.tv or find the direct link in the description under the video. Don't forget to also download the 2C TV app from the App Store. Now, let me just get some quick reaction from the live chat while we're here. Stu says, President Trump versus Resident Chump. Good start, Stu. Good start. That's not too bad. Could be better. Ivan says, this has to be Starmer's dumbest move yet. And I don't think, actually, I will challenge you, Ivan. It is a very stupid move, yeah. Picking the sides of the UN lawyers over their closest allies. But actually, in reality, what Starmer did when it came to the Chagos Islands, that was even a worse betrayal than this. Like, I know it's controversial, but actually what he did with the Chagos Islands and handing them to the CCP, that was even worse. But the reason I said that was because when you think about everything that Starmer's government have done, including that, Chagos, including basically reversing Brexit and having a secret relationship, it's not even that secret because they announced it, relationship with the European Union, despite the referendum. This decision to suspend intelligence ties with the US, it makes sense. I'm not surprised. If you forget about everything that this government have done over the last year and a few months, then yes, this news will be shocking. Like, what? I mean, yeah, we do hate Starmer, but this is terrible. What's going on? But just think about everything else they've done over the last year. You were like, yeah, not that shocking. It makes absolute sense. Kemal says, why is Trump treating Al-Jalani like a VIP? There are obvious reasons for that. Has he received security guarantees for Alawites, Christians, Druze and the Kurds in Syria? Allegedly, yes. He's giving a blank check of trust to him the same way he does to Erdogan. No, Erdogan's different because it's nothing to do with Erdogan. It's because Turkey is a member of NATO, and since Erdogan got elected, technically, first time, you have to deal with that idiot. But it's Turkey in general that's a member of NATO. It just makes things difficult. But with Syria, it's the new Syria, backed, obviously led by the man who self-identifies as president of Syria, al-Jilani. That is a whole different thing because the only alternative, well, you either try to keep him close and keep an eye on him, and the US, President Trump and the US government, they have conditions on this friendship with the Syrians. So we are monitoring what you do. If you cross the line, we will no longer be backing you. It's the same with, of course, Israel. The Israelis have also said the same thing. That's different because the other alternative would be what? To go and bring him down, do a coup against al-Jilani to bring back Assad, for example. But that's not going to help because Assad is also against the West. So, you have to basically pick the battles. And as long as they keep an eye on al-Jilani, then of course that makes sense. If it's a blank check trust, then it's not a good idea. Which is not, obviously. Michael says, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Do you think, I wonder, because based on what Michael said, which ironically actually comes from Michael Corleone, do you think that's what Starmer is thinking? Do you think Starmer is actually thinking, well, I'm gonna keep what has been doing with President Trump, because he doesn't see Trump as a friend. We know Starmer's history and how he thinks. So do you think he's been keeping President Trump close as an enemy? But I don't think it's even that smart, because the next time President Trump and Starmer have a conversation, that's not going to go too well. We know what President Trump is going to say. Speaker Shauna says, it seems like it's the beginning of the end of both the globalist world order and the isolationist reactionary. They're thinking, I don't see it like that, because the issue with the modern version of the world order, which is basically led by a bunch of globalist bureaucrats, unelected idiots with connections to corporations, if that is going down, and I'm very much against it, obviously, it will be the result of not people like us, people like me. It will be the result of the isolationist reactionaries. So I think if one goes down, the other one will be coming up, at least short term. So globalist world order goes down, the isolationist reactionaries will come up for a short period of time until sanity takes over, and actually those who believe in sovereignty and their national identity could actually take back control and have some sort of grown-up mentality about how this world actually operates, just the way President Trump sees the world. Because it's fascinating how President Trump gets attacked by two sides on two different levels. He gets accused of being basically Hitler, as in the post-1938-39 Hitler, where expansionist warmonger, right? He gets accused of being a warmonger. He also gets accused of being an isolationist reactionary. President Trump is not an isolationist and is not a neocon. His policy is the way he did with business. He does the same with foreign policy. On a geopolitical level, President Trump is doing a pragmatic approach. Now, does it mean it's always the right approach? Because you can criticize some of the policies, some of the moves, some of the gambles that the White House have made around the world. But generally speaking, at times, the White House, the current White House, would go towards more, let's withdraw. And at times, let's get America involved. Just like what you're seeing in the Caribbean. It's in the interest of the Americans to be out there. If you had a president or a world leader that was 100% a neocon, and an expansionist globalist, or a 100% isolationist, you can't have them running a country like the US. You have to be pragmatic and practical. Anyway, Nomad says the UK academia is hijacked by people who support Hamas. At the local level, this country is ruled by Pakistanis. That's true. On a local level, definitely. Starmer and Bangladeshi, which basically at this point The Pakistanis and Bangladeshis in Britain, not in their countries, but in Britain, are basically similar in terms of the mentality. Obviously, in South Asia, they would differ. Starmer is just a tool, perhaps. And RG from Israel says, why are people surprised? He watches his own back. The UN can actually turn on him. The US can only harm the rest of their country, but not him directly. I think, yeah, people like Starmer, people like Mark Carney in Canada, because this decision is not really just about Britain, it's also Canada withdrawing and cutting off ties with the American government on this issue. Both of those types of politicians, Carney, Starmer, they are looking at the cards that they've been dealt with and who they whose side they're on, and each group, that includes the UN, that includes the European Union, and even the unelected bodies like the ICC, ICJ, all these international groups, they are saying, okay, so which side will be better off with long term? Which side could betray us more? Or could destroy my future, for example? Because they are known as what we call liberal globalists, right? So they think that it's probably best to short term alienate President Trump because the other friends will have their back. But the problem is that is not the case, because the people that we've mentioned, including those connected to the United Nations or the European Union, they have no loyalty. If they want to, they will throw Starmer and Mark Carney and Emmanuel Macron under the bus when needed. Lisa says, what's with the red flower on the lapel on prime ministers? That's the red poppy for the Remembrance weekend, which was 2 days ago. But they still wear it for a few more days. Of course, it's about the veterans and, of course, the fallen heroes of primarily the First World War. That was the point of it, but of course it kind of represents the first two world wars. Although these days I think it also represents any veteran from the 20th century onwards. And of course Keir Starmer, that's a good one, Starmer, gets paid very handsomely, allegedly. It's fine, you live in Israel, you can say whatever you want, you're not going to get sued. I didn't say, I just read your comments, so I'm fine as well. Robert says, if the UK cuts the US intelligence sharing under Five Eyes, is an idiot. So that's the thing. So the move is by both Canada and Britain. And what they've essentially done, unofficially, they have withdrawn some of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing. That's basically what they've done. So Starmer has basically undermined the biggest intelligence alliance because he's scared that he's going to get blamed for President Trump killing off the cartels. The fact that he's indirectly taking the sides of Maduro in Venezuela and the cartels in South America is embarrassing. By not helping, basically, Starmer says, I will not share intelligence when Britain knows that, for example, this group of communists or drug traffickers are going to do something bad. We're not going to tell our closest friend. That's basically what's going on. That is the reality of the situation. They are defending, indirectly, they are defending the enemies. It's unbelievably stupid. Just because he wants to be cautious, to not rock the boat, no pun intended, of the United Nations and the UN legal experts. That's the main reason. The so-called UN legal experts have warned the British state this is a bad idea because President Trump attacking the enemy might not be legal when it comes to international law, which, by the way, international law is nonsense. It's not a thing. It doesn't exist. There's no actual obligation for anybody, any country or government to actually follow it. It's not backed by any constitution. Only your own sovereign domestic laws are what is important for your country. That is the reality. You don't like it, you cut off the treaties, international treaties. This is absolutely fascinating. You got someone who doesn't know anything about the real world defending, indirectly defending the enemy. Stephen Ford says, watch this, it's embarrassing that Tusi doesn't know that Venezuela has nothing to do with the US drug problem. Imagine actually thinking this. Imagine, genuinely, Stephen really believes this. Now, you guys can also interact with him in the live chat. Just let him know what you think, or let him know the facts about the drug cartels and Maduro's government and the funding of his communist regime. And the fact that we've had testimony after testimony about the connections with the South American socialist regimes, dictators, and the drug cartels is absolutely fascinating. How stupid do you have to be? Anonymous says exactly, to see the country that paved the way for the entire world does not international. Does not what international? There's a word missing here. Ivan says Starmer is now a drug trafficker. That could be the new allegations against him now, essentially. Aaron says that Trump will slap high tariffs on those pulling info. The thing is, the US military are not going to be too happy, because if something happens again with the vessels in South America and we find out that it could have been prevented if the UK could have told America, then obviously certain people will be in trouble. That includes the British Prime Minister and the Canadian Prime Minister. Kevin says, Prime Minister Starmer and the Europeans are provoking President Trump into pulling out of NATO and then pulling the US troops from Britain and Europe. F around and find out that, well, yeah, that will be terrible for Europeans, because, well, firstly, US withdraws from NATO. That's the end of NATO, because NATO is the US and the US is NATO. Without America, NATO doesn't exist. It's not a thing. What is it? Well, if America leaves NATO, NATO is going to be called the Coalition of the Willing. Yeah, how's that going to go? The Coalition of the Willing. That's so fascinating. Anyway, what's important is, who is she? I want to know what she's saying. I'm very fascinated by this.
He continues to make every effort to maintain balance in a world of increasingly polarised and divisive media.
Divisive media!
She makes
she's Labour.
The important point.
They're debating about the BBC crisis as well.
The seriousness of the failings which the BBC has admitted, accepted, apologised for, and now must show tangible action in order to address.
Speaking of the BBC is dying and we are celebrating that. So don't forget again to use the promo code RIPBBC to get 50% off 2C TV Plus annual memberships by going on 2c.tv. Do it now. It's the best way you can support our independent media team, as well as, of course, getting something out of it, because you will get full access to all our documentaries, original series, interviews, podcasts. What else do we have? Oh yeah, the chat forum, of course, as well, if you want to talk to me directly and like-minded people. Where is the next one? Okay, we got Kamal saying, will Trump cut off NATO funding and stop subsidizing European defense with troops in the Balkans in response to this? Time to take on the useful idiots. No, I think, well, that would be a weird, response. Using the NATO relationship to punish. It won't be necessary. The US could, basically, the US has a bigger card to play, which is stop intelligence sharing with the UK. Let's not forget that the UK gets more from the US when it comes to intel. And also the US could just increase tariffs on the UK. That's the best thing that the US government could play against this. But what is this? Oh my God. Matthew says, Tusi, the situation is so much more complex than you make it look. Did I make it look simplified? It's not a simplified situation. Please consider the mistakes Trump has committed. Which mistake? You have to list them first. I hate Starmer, but he didn't start the breakup of the alliance. It was Trump. Are you kidding me with this? Are we just surrounded on tonight's live stream by a bunch of idiots? Which alliance did President Trump break up? You need to give me actual context. And what mistakes are you talking about? Which alliance? Everything that we've seen so far, and there have been certain policies that I've criticized the White House on and President Trump, some, and there have been other things. Everything else that you're talking about in terms of international alliances has been America increasing and strengthening alliances. Whether it's with Zelensky, actually forcing the Europeans to come together, whether it was on Gaza and Israel, forcing everybody to get to Egypt. Now, you could judge the overall long-term consequences afterwards, but the people you are defending, including the Europeans, they all backed President Trump. So if you're saying President Trump made the wrong moves, the people you are defending, the Europeans, they all defended him. They all supported him. So that means they were all parts of it. America has been leading international alliances over the last year compared to the last 4 years. That's been the reality. Speaker Shauna says America and Germany build a new alliance soon, assuming things keep going in their current direction. Well, there's no need to end anything because the beauty of systems like Britain is that Starmer is not going to last that long. So the US government should just wait for Starmer to go and then back to normal. Whether it's going to be Reform UK government with Nigel Farage or anybody else that's not basically Starmer and Labour, it's going to be fine. It's just a short period of darkness, just like what the Americans dealt with for 4 years with Joe Biden. America's back. Joe Biden's gone. America's back. Britain will be back when Starmer goes, whether it's Reform UK or whoever that is not basically socialists. Anyway, we'll keep you guys posted on this. We're waiting for the reaction from the White House and the Pentagon. Subscribe to the channel, join 2C TV Plus, download the app. I'm Maya 2C, and we are the media.